Batman Capes Crusader dropped on Amazon Prime. And we're going to have two reviews this episode. We're going to have a spoiler-free review and a spoiler review. Okay? This is going to be the spoiler-free review. And I'm really passionate about Batman. Batman is, besides Superman and Spider-Man, of course, Batman is one of the most influential fictional characters on my life. And when it comes to getting Batman right, there's a few things that Batman needs in order to make sure that he's done right. First is understanding Batman as a character, what drives him to be Batman and why. The next thing is understanding Batman's lines and the rules that he has. And finally, can you tell a good narrative? Understanding the Batman character, can you utilize his moral compass, his moral code, his strengths, and his weaknesses, and tell a narrative surrounding that? There are things Batman Caped Crusader does right, and there are things Batman Caped Crusader does wrong. And unfortunately, the wrong things kind of hurt the overarching plot for me. Now, let me say I like this show. I do. I love elements about this show, actually. There are certain things I love, and there are certain things I don't love. I understand this is not supposed to be Batman the Animated Series. And I understand that it's not trying to be the definitive version of Batman. But what that version of Batman is the animated series. What pisses me off is it could have been. It had potential to be. Had it just done a few things right, it could have not just been a spiritual successor, but a spiritual successor that actually succeeded in taking the notch up to the next level. And perhaps shelving shelving the animated series as the definitive version of Batman. But because of the changes it wants to make, it doesn't. Because Batman the Animated Series, at the end of the day, doesn't just understand and focus on Batman, but it has respect for Batman's world. It has respect for what makes Batman's world work. It has respect for the comics that came before it, continuity that came before it. It might put its own spin on it in certain areas, but it does it without making drastic changes to the fundamentals of the Batman mythos and world. Batman Caped Crusader, in order to stand out and be different, makes unnecessary changes that it doesn't need to make, and therefore sacrifices its spot in being the definitive Batman. Not only does it sacrifice its spot, but it sacrifices its overall arcing story and plot in the process by altering its characters. Now, I'm not going to get into the spoilers of that yet. I will. But there's a few things I want to talk about. First, I want to talk about what this show did right. Without getting into spoilers here again, the show does Batman right. If you are looking for a show, and I know that sounds contradictory for what I just said, but I'm going to explain myself here. Batman and Bruce Wayne as a character are done well here. I'll get more into that in my spoiler review, but Batman and Bruce Wayne are done very well. The problem comes in my spoiler review when I get into that. For as well as they're done right, they're not the focus of the show, which is going to sound weird. But stick around for my spoiler review, or go watch the show and then stick around for the spoiler review later and you'll understand. Right? They are great and done well, but not the focus of the show. The voice actor who plays Batman does a fantastic job. Is he Kevin Conroy? No, but nobody's Kevin Conroy. But he does a fantastic job. He hits the nail on the head between both Bruce Wayne and Batman, and he does it very, very well. Batman in this show had potential to be definitive Batman. There's just a couple things I didn't like about it that we'll discuss. The music in the show is wonderful. I got nothing to say about that. Music is amazing. The animation is fantastic. It is beautiful. It is very reminiscent of Batman the Animated Series, of course, because it's a spiritual successor. And it's very reminiscent of that style of animation. And I love the animated style here. I think it does well. I love the look of everybody in the show. I love the look of Batman, especially. I think his costume looks great. I love the look of it. The timepiece set in the 40s has its advantages, being the look of the show is great, and its disadvantages, which we'll go over later on, is to which there's a lot of modernisms that take place in the 40s that make it feel like it's not the 40s and pull you out of the show. If you were going to set the show in the 40s, keep the show to the 40s. But for some reason, the show has the aesthetic of the 40s with the technological limitations of the 40s without the culture and the period piece of how humans talk and interact in the 40s. There's a lot of 2020 crap and modern dayisms that are put into the 40s. Why make it the 40s then? So that's another detractor from the show. Is it's supposed to be this period piece that doesn't abide by the period piece rules. When you spin on that as well, when we take a peek at the characters, this is where the show falls for me. Because other than Batman, in my opinion, these characters are just not done right. A lot of them are completely unidentical to their original classic takes on the characters, which some might say that's the point. But for me, it is a detractor. Because I get it, it's an Elseworld story. I get it, they're trying to do something different. But when you alter the characters like this, you have to alter the plot because characters don't behave how they usually would behave, or they're not even the same as they usually are. And when you're trying to tell a Batman story, sometimes you just want to see classic Batman characters doing classic Batman things. But that's not what happens because a lot of these characters, other than Batman, aren't the classic versions of themselves. And so you get these elements of Batman interacting with these characters, and not only is it foreign, but it's distasteful. Because I wanted to see Batman interact with these characters in a different way, in the classic way. And so I wasn't a fan of a lot of the changes they made with these characters. And that leads us to the plot. Unfortunately, the plot, due to the characters being certain ways that the way they are, the plot has to go in that direction to match the character arcs. And for me, while there are elements of the detective noir stuff that I like, and there are elements of the plot that I like, and there are elements of the criminal underground and stuff like that that I really enjoy, the way that these characters are pushed and utilized makes me not like the direction of the overall plot as much. And again, I like this show and I wanted to love this show. But unfortunately, the way that they utilize some of the characters, most of the characters actually just missed for me and really put a damper on my enjoyment of the show. Batman does a great job. Batman's psychology is hit 10 out of 10 home run. But the way they tried to tell this story is altered for me because they altered classic characters and I wanted classic Batman interactions. So I highly recommend you watch the show because, again, there are elements of the show that I like, but there are elements of the show that I dislike. We're going to be able to get all into it next in the spoiler section if you're sticking with me. So if you're sticking around, we're going over spoilers now. If you haven't seen the show yet, they're like 24 minutes an episode, 10 episodes. Go check it out. Go watch it. Then come